So Israel is fully engaged in what they're calling their eighth front war. That's a reference to the 7 countries that they are currently in conflict with. But the eighth front is really the so-called PR war. And it's all about kind of manipulating the narrative to win the PR war now that they're kind of losing favorability, not just among the left, but among younger conservatives. So a few weeks ago, during the UN General Assembly, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with social media influencers and laid out a plan to essentially attempt to win the PR war. And we've got that clip. Let's take a look.
How do we fight back? Our influencers. I think you should also talk to them if you have a chance. To that community, they're very important. And secondly, we're going to have to use the tools of battle. You know, the weapons change over time. You can't fight today with swords. That doesn't work very well. But we have to fight with the weapons that apply to the battlefields in which we're engaged. And the most important ones are in social media. So we have to talk to Elon. He's not an enemy. He's a friend. We should talk to him. Now, if we can get those two things, we get a lot. We have to fight the fight, okay? To give direction to the Jewish people and give direction to our non-Jewish friends or those who could be our Jewish our friends.
Yeah. So after that meeting, a lot of different news stories came out, including one from Responsible Statecraft, arguing that Israel is paying influencers $7,000 per post. Now, the way that that's being carried out is, in my opinion, meant to kind of make it difficult to figure out where the money's coming from. Conceal the money. I mean, you see this happen with nonprofits all the time. They write that these influencers are likely being paid around $7,000 per post on social media, such as TikTok and Instagram, on behalf of Israel. Bridges Partners, a firm working for the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, sent a series of invoices for its influencer campaign to Havas Media Group in Germany, an international media group working for Israel. The invoices detailed a sum of nearly $1 million, $900,000, starting in June and slated to end in November for a cohort of 14 to 18 influencers to create content. Now, that story has led to all sorts of influencers being accused of taking $7,000 per post. I know I've seen that happen a lot with you, Emily, and you were also at that meeting with influencers. So what's the reality of the situation?
So I'll speak on behalf of myself and honestly on behalf of the government a little bit here, the Israeli government. There are a lot of Jewish advocates who are making bank off of this war. And it's not from the government because honestly, they can't afford what we charge for public speaking. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has plenty of conferences in Jerusalem. They don't even do so much as reimbursing your flight. We all they target influencers who agree with the cause and then recruit us for meetings like what you saw with Bibi for messaging on the same, I guess, wavelength, because everyone's kind of putting all these statements out there. And Bibi was like, why don't we unify our messaging? Which, if you're already pro-Israel, that's a good idea. Now, I think what it turned into was, oh, they don't even believe in the cause. They're getting paid $7,000 per post, which if I was getting $7,000 a post, with all due respect, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I'd be on vacation once a week because the amount of posts I've done about Israel for free, I'd be a multi-millionaire if that were true, and many others too. With that being said, I can safely say the government's not funding any influencer. And to be honest, I don't think these Jewish influencers are worth their money spending on. I think they do what every other government does. These sponsored trips, visit Jerusalem. It's mostly for non-Jews, actually. It's mostly for Catholics. It's mostly for minority communities. I know they did a trans trip to Israel through the MFA. They did a Blacks for Israel trip, but it's actually not the Jews who are benefiting from these trips or agendas. We use our own money to get there. If we meet with the government officials, I met with Prime Minister, I met with Herzog, that wasn't on their dime. That was on my dime. I'm sure if you go on your own expense and you meet them, you'll be accused, too, of taking the $7,000 per post. It's just not the reality. And the Esther Project, never heard of it. Whatever you just said, Chava Media, never heard of it. Maybe other people are taking that money. I'm very jealous if they are. Let me know why you're getting paid and I'm not. But this is not something unique to Israel. Imagine women for Trump. We already all like Trump. Now the government's like, hey, guys, we're going to pay you to say something you already believe in. I would sign up for that immediately. Yeah. And Qatar is doing the same thing. Saudi is doing the same thing. Every country is doing the same thing, but it's like Israel will get singled out for that. And that's what I don't like about that.
I think the issue is that the volume in which they're doing it. There's a massive amount of money. And with all due respect, I don't think it's completely accurate to say that influencers aren't getting paid. Because let me tell you.
By the government?
Wait. They offer that money to me. And I sent you that exact email.
Oh, yeah,
let me pull it up. The Consulate General of Israel, okay, wrote me an email offering to pay me to go to Israel. They would pay all my expenses and also pay me. And then they offered to give me a spot for my guest. I shot that down. I declined because it didn't sit right with me. This is about a year ago, okay? So I don't think Anna was saying that they were targeting Jewish influencers. The issue is that they were targeting influencers. They are targeting influencers.
But yeah, I just
because
said
it
they
happened
do
to
these trips to Israel. They pay for their costs and their hotels.
You're saying that the point that she's making is correct. They are targeting influencers to convey a pro-Israel message around the country because they understand.
Did they ask you to put out any messaging, or they offered you a
trip?
They did,
absolutely.
In the email? Can I see it?
By the way, they
wanted you to use specific language while visiting
no.
the trip?
They don't give me a script. They wanted me to use the way that I usually talk with my audience and convey a pro-Israel message to my audience, which I refuse to do.
But are you upset they offered you that trip when every other country does the same thing for influencers?
I've never gotten another.
Yeah, they do.
I've never
Qatar's doing a trip at the end of the month for Black conservative influencers.
But we don't have a problem in the country of high level, social media influencers influencing our government in terms of foreign policy as it pertains to Qatar. And by the way, Qatar is a U.S. ally. We literally have our largest military base there. Mm-hmm. And in fact, it played a really important role in ceasefire negotiations, which is why Hamas negotiators were there to begin with. That was at the behest of Donald Trump, who wanted them to remain there so they can, continue the negotiations and get a ceasefire signed. I think what people are noticing and what people are being critical of is the level of influence, it appears, Israel has over our foreign policy, both through the Israel lobby, of course, bribing our politicians.
Well, the Qatar lobby is putting tenfold what Israel's putting.
There's no equivalent of AIPAC
lobbies?
On the Qatar side. There's just no equivalent.
There isn't an equivalent. You're right.
There's AIPAC hegemony in the United States Congress right now. Like, a lot of Republican representatives are telling the truth. Matt Gaetz, who's, he has no incentive to keep up the charade anymore. He's saying the first thing that happened when I entered the United States Congress was sit down for a Q&A session with AIPAC, and then AIPAC members would come and basically auction off their politicians. Like, if they like you, they'll donate.
Yeah.
So they would hit a button and say, oh, yeah, Matt Gaetz did a good job. It looks like he's going to be loyal to Israel. I'm going to donate $5,000 to his campaign. They were like selling off politicians like cattle. This is not the way the American system should be.
And it's more, look, we're just talking about influencers here. There's something even more nefarious happening, which we just learned about thanks to reporting from Dropsite News. They obtained leaked emails showing that in 2015, when Republican Senator Marco Rubio was running in the Republican primary, he was specifically being vetted.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah,
wow.
He was specifically being vetted by Israel to see whether or not he's pro-Israel enough. And so Larry Ellison, who's the founder of Oracle, was working alongside the Israeli ambassador to the United States to do the vetting to make sure he's favorable enough to Israel. And then after he was vetted, Larry Ellison held a huge fundraiser for him in the election cycle.
Yeah, and Anna, you and I have clashed a lot on this issue, and I want to give you so much credit for being on the forefront of this, because
I wouldn't say I'm on the forefront of anything.
The forefront of what? You're saying that they're
exposing the foreign influence on our politicians, on our influencers, essentially everywhere. And I know that because I lived it. I ran for Congress when I was 24 years old. It was psychotic. It really was. I don't recommend it. It's really traumatizing for someone that young. But one of the first people who approached me was somebody from AIPAC, and they asked me to write a paper in support of, at that time, there was a lot of discussion about the JCPOA, remember, in 2016? So around that time, I had to write a paper pledging my allegiance to Israel. And the reason why I did that, I was incredibly naive. My mentor was Congresswoman Grace Meng. She represents a Flushing area. There are a lot of Jewish Americans there. And she's like, you got to write this paper, otherwise you're not going to win. I was running from Pennsylvania. She's like, you got to do this. It's just the way that, I hate it too, but it's
what
just
about
the way
all the congressmen and senators who hate Israel very vocally. Actually, they make careers
Which
like
ones?
Matt
Which
Gaetz
one?
about hating Israel. Thomas Massey, you just mentioned Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene. There's so many congressmen and congresswomen.
They don't hate
I
Israel.
wouldn't say they hate
They are
Israel.
America first. They understand that we are the United
America
States of
first
America.
is great, but why is it
and
America
they're against
only?
forever wars.
Why
I
is
think
it?
that's a big thing. Is where's the money going? I think
Right.
one of the really important things here, and one of the great things we can celebrate about this moment that we're in historically, is that we know all of this.
That's
because
true.
listen, Big Pharma has been buying off influencers and
Yes.
politicians for a long, long time, and there's no reporting. Not even to mention they buy off major media in this country all the time, so major media won't run the stories that are exposing the corruption
Yeah.
that is within not just Big Pharma, but the AMA, the APA, the list goes on. At least we know about this. I find that really refreshing for our politics today, and I think we have RFK Jr., our secretary, and also President Trump, really to thank for this level of transparency that's newfound so that we can have this conversation. Because I do think it's important to understand if billions of dollars are going in from various countries, and I'm going to Israel this week. I'm going to, full disclosure, nobody's paying for it. If they'd like to, I'll take up a collection.
I'll take it
Little
too if you're
GoFundMe
watching.
account. But I think it is important that we know what money is coming in, and maybe even that there are groups out there taking count of this country put in this much money, this country put in this. That's great to know.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's more transparency now compared to years prior. I mean, corruption has been a really big part of our government, especially after the Citizens United ruling. And look, I want to be very, very clear about something. I want all the money out, okay? But if we have to pick between corporate interests and foreign interests, we can only have one. I want all foreign money out.
Yeah,
period.
I think you've been very consistent on this issue, and something that I think you and I will align on. I don't want to be shipping off $40 billion to Argentina either.
I totally agree with that.
I don't.
Why
think
are we bailing out Argentina?
We should be elevating and prioritizing the American people.
Yes.
Full stop. End of story. No argument. I don't want to be sending billions of dollars to Ukraine or Israel. I just don't. I care about America. That's it. I don't think we should be fighting Israel's wars. It's just not our responsibility.
Do you feel like it's that simple? Because when people say America first, the problem is I think they conflate that with America only. You know, America still needs their allies, especially. I know a lot of people do like that, which historically has just not worked for a country to operate on their own, not have any, whether it's trade deals or foreign funding. Now, I agree that I don't want to be giving Qatar or Israel or Ukraine or anybody money. I always say, Israel, I hope one day you don't need America, because if a country can't defend themselves, maybe you don't deserve a country. And that applies to everyone.
I agree with that.
However, it's hyper-fixated on Israel. Because when I was actually talking to Cenk about this on X, it was like a public dispute. I named him 8 countries that got as much money as Israel, if not more, that nobody cares to talk about. That's why it's Israel derangement syndrome.
People, though?
Hold on,
Did they
hold
what?
on, hold on. Put the mass slaughter aside for a second. Let's just talk about dollars and cents. Israel receives more foreign aid than any other country by a lot. We have given them over $320 million. Since October 7th, we have given them $31 billion. And by the way, when I say give them $31 billion, we are literally, as Americans, borrowing money, because remember, we're in debt to the tune of $37 trillion. We are borrowing money to hand over to Israel to commit, let's keep it real, atrocities in Gaza and the West Bank.
And
that's the way
according to
I
the
view
United
it.
Nations genocide. So.
Right, and the word genocide is thrown on very loosely. I don't call losing a war a genocide. It's not a genocide. Let me make that very clear right now. What happened in Gaza is not a genocide.
So you know
what's a
better than genocide scholars?
Oh, I'm sorry. Everyone's a genocide scholar. In light of everyone being a
literal
genocide scholar, I have friends that are
genocide
genocide scholars.
Okay,
I know
fine.
what the qualification is.
So what do you call it? Well, what is it exactly?
I call it a war that they lost.
flattened the entirety of the Gaza
They lost
Strip.
the war. They lost the war that they started.
They flattened it.
Why? If they were flattening
They
the
didn't
Gaza
just
Strip,
lose a
how come
war. They
Hamas
were
didn't
annihilated.
surrender?
We're talking about
Why wasn't there a surrender then? If they were being annihilated, where was it? You know what? We're losing this war. Hamas, I care about my civilians. A joke. Let me end this war before there's no place for them to live in.
Do the
no,
Israelis
I'd rather
care about
die
their civilians?
as a jihad.
Do the Israelis?
Worse.
Do they really? Do you know about the Hannibal
civilians on
Directive?
roofs?
Do you know what
Yeah,
the Hannibal
I know that.
Directive is?
October 7th was the Hannibal Directive. That's the stupidest conspiracy theory.
It's
I've
not a
ever heard in my
conspiracy
life.
theory.
It's a
Yoav
conspiracy
Gallant
theory.
confessed to it.
That they allowed October 7th to happen.
Look it up. Yoav Gallant, he did. They would rather kill their own people than allow Hamas to take the hostages and have leverage over the Israeli government. This has been confirmed.
By the
Just
way-
because you don't
by the
like
way,
it
with all
doesn't
due
mean
respect,
it doesn't exist.
None other than the New York Times confirmed what Anna just said. The New York Times.
Oh, the New York Times, who can't make up their mind if one day the hostages were raped, the
May I
hostages
finish
weren't
my
raped.
sentence before you interject,
But that's not a
though?
great source, but okay.
But look, the end of the story
So
really
what is a
How
good
many
source?
The end of the story
Hold on,
really
hold
is.
on.
They made so many
Is your social
corrections
media
in New
feed
York
the only
Times.
acceptable source?
No, and
for
I
you?
literally only speak
Can
for
I
myself
finish
on
my
social
sentence,
media
by the
feed.
way?
Yes,
I'm
please
still.
go
Can I
ahead.
finish the point about the New York Times?
Okay, Lindy, and then I want to hear from Dr. Loudon.
Okay, as I was saying, none other than the New York Times confirmed what Anna just said, that the Israeli government knew at least a year before October 7th that something would be coming.
Correct.
That an attack of some sort would be happening. Mm-hmm. Okay,
That's
so
every
you
day in
can see
Israel.
that part.
Yeah, I understand that. That's every day in Israel. You're going to be in Israel. Hopefully, we don't have sirens next week, but every single day they
No,
gain intelligence.
not just a regular
I
run-of-the-mill
understand.
attack, but a catastrophic attack. They had intel and they sat on it and chose not to act.
They got intel a year ago that something was in the mix. They understood that, and that's honestly, they should always have their guard up. I'm very resentful that they couldn't anticipate something like that happening. I'm very angry that their guard was down and it took the IDF hours and all the IDF bases were attacked and they had no intel. However, if you're going to now turn that into Israel knew it was going to happen on that day, on that time, and they allowed it to happen, you're out of your mind.
Did I
If
say
they got
that?
that's
Do
what
you
she's
need to
saying.
regurgitate?
That's what she said, and that's not what you said. But if anyone who's watching this believes that they knew October 7th was going to happen at 6:29 a.m. 2023, and they just told everyone, hey, stand down.
Okay, again,
that's
you're
insane.
Hold on,
completely
stop. Pause
distorting
for a
whatever
second.
I just said.
No, pause, because there are IDF, and this is all on tape, so you can watch it for yourselves. There are IDF soldiers who have been testifying, and they say that the morning of October 7th, they were given a message to stand down. I don't know why. And it did take several hours, 6-7 hours, for the IDF to respond to people as they were being massacred. And by the way, to be very clear, what Hamas did was disgusting. They committed atrocities. They targeted and killed innocent people. And I will never defend Hamas, ever. I don't care how angry anyone gets at me for that. But at the same time, there was the intel from a year ago, prior to the attack. Then 3 weeks prior to the attack, they received additional intel indicating that Hamas was planning on taking hostages. So if I were Benjamin Netanyahu, what would I do? I would make sure that I have a buildup of IDF soldiers at the border with Gaza to ensure that my people are safe. But he didn't do that, and I don't know why he didn't do
Well,
that.
I can tell you exactly why, because he's interested in his own political preservation, and he saw that as an opportunity to continue in power, because he was under investigation, as was his wife, and he was nervous as hell that they were going to get him. And that's why he refused to end the war until President Trump rightfully forced his hand.
You know, after all this,
can
he's
I
still going
please,
to win.
am I allowed to finish a point?
Yeah, but you're like, Qatar talking points are really
well,
silly right
first
now.
of all,
That's not nice.
that is completely offensive.
I think
That's
it's offensive
completely-
to say that
Can
the
I-
Prime
can
Minister
I
allowed a
please
war to
finish a
happen
point?
so he could stay in power, and he allowed
By
the
the way,
civilians
this
to
is
get
a
slaughtered.
commonly
Just
this
'cause
is
it's common
commonly
doesn't mean
shared
it's
perception.
true.
It could be true, then it is true in this case, because Benjamin Netanyahu understood that as soon as the war is over, the Israeli people would rise up and demand his resignation, which is actually what's happening. They booed him when
Yeah, they
Steve
did.
Witkoff gave that speech. They roared in support of President Trump, as they should have. This man was amazing. Through sheer willpower, he ended this war. All credit, well, for the time being anyway. He brought peace to the land. But Benjamin Netanyahu, when Witkoff mentioned his name, you know what happened?
I saw.
They booed.
I have social media.
vehemently. You don't have to be disrespectful when I'm making these points. I'm just telling you
Okay.
that this man wanted to stay in power and realized that continuing the war was a surefire way to do that.
Would you
Dr.
feel
Loud.
silly if after this war is over, he wins in a democratic election because the majority of Israel actually continuously votes for him over and over again, and the minority that you saw that day on Steve Witkoff's video are the same minority that we see on X that are always bashing Trump and hosting these huge protests against Trump? Doesn't mean he lost
No,
the
I-
election.
Do you really
feel
think
silly.
that Netanyahu's a good leader? I mean, prior to October 7th, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis taking to the streets because he was trying to
Can I be
weaken the
honest?
Supreme Court.
I couldn't care less if Bibi Netanyahu is the prime minister tomorrow, or if it's Naftali Bennett, or if it's who's the guy that I don't like, Yair Lapid. I don't care, because my job as an American is to make sure that their relationship is good and anti-Semitism is in check in the United States. Tomorrow, I don't care who's the prime minister, but in this war, blaming him for every single move that they perceive as wrong, I don't think any prime minister, anyone, would have handled this war any differently than Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Oh, I vehemently disagree with that. I think honestly, the person who's most responsible for anti-Semitism in the world today is Benjamin Netanyahu. And I love the Israeli people. I sincerely do. The Jewish, I mean, I have such a profound love for the Jewish people. Such a deep, deep, abiding love. Most of my friends are Jewish. The people who have been kindest to me in the darkest periods of my life were almost like all Jewish. But the travesty that Benjamin Netanyahu inflicted on them has been so severe. Because people around the world see the atrocities going down in Gaza and they just can't stand it. And it can all be ascribed to one man. It's not the Jewish people. It's not the Israeli people. It's Benjamin Netanyahu.
It's the government.
And his selfish need to hold on to power.
Yeah, I agree.
Can I ask you, I actually want to ask everyone, what would you do if you were him? October 7th happened.
I would resign immediately.
October 7th happened. Do you think that now it's time for internal conflict and let's find the new prime minister? That's the first thing you do when your country's attacked?
I would call for him to resign immediately because he failed to be a leader in protecting his own people.
Okay, and then regarding the war, forget Netanyahu. You're the prime minister of Israel. How do you address October 7th?
You address October 7th. I mean, I've been led to believe that Mossad is like the most sophisticated intelligence gathering operation on the planet, which means that they would have the capability and capacity to, instead of leveling the entirety of the Gaza Strip, find where Hamas is and actually target Hamas. But that wasn't really the goal. The real goal was to make the Gaza Strip uninhabitable, engage in a campaign of ethnic cleansing. This is what the Israeli government says out loud on a regular basis, and essentially take and settle that land as part of the greater Israel project.
Exactly, I was just going to mention that. And by
So
the
why
way,
didn't they do it? They won. Now the war's over.
They're doing it right now.
They're taking Gaza?
They're going to take
Can
Gaza.
I buy property in Gaza now?
I mean, it would be pretty disgusting.
What if that didn't happen? But what if that doesn't happen? Are you going to rescind your statement that
Absolutely. I will very
happily
happily rescind my statement.
I've been hearing that for
but I'm probably not going to have to do that.
I would love to be proven wrong, but and you know,
I would love to be proven wrong. That would make me so happy.
What would you have
There's
done
a reason
if you were the prime minister of Israel after October 7th, besides resign? In terms of the war, how do you get your hostages back? By the way, Anna,
and what would you do? What would you do?
What would I do?
If they found Hamas, then why did they level the entirety of the Gaza Strip? Every single residential building is gone.
You win a war until there's surrender.
Why are you killing women and children?
Because Hamas embeds themselves in civilian homes. Al-Shifa Hospital is Hamas headquarters. Do you even know that?
I don't believe
that
for a second.
She's saying find Hamas. Israel found them. They're all over the place.
Every building
in their uniforms
in Gaza had Hamas. Every single one.
Nurseries had rocket launchers. Schools, rocket launchers. Al-Shifa Hospital, headquarters. Netanyahu invades a hospital. Oh my God, it's a genocide. Why is Hamas in a hospital?
Are you saying that
Why are they in a school?
Are you saying that every one of the 67,000 people who lost their lives, many of whom are women and children,
I blame Hamas.
You're saying that it was, it was justified. Every one of them
should not have been civilian human shields. They should not have been in hospitals. Do you know everyone likes to talk about Bibi Netanyahu being precise when it comes to Hezbollah and genociding when it comes to Gaza? One thing, and I'm not giving credit to Hezbollah here, they didn't embed themselves in civilian homes. They actually wore their military uniform and were committing jihad out and proud in the public. When Hamas, during the war, everyone was in civilian clothing, but you notice now after the ceasefire, Hamas are taking the streets with their machine guns and kids, and everyone's Hamas now. But during the war, they were posing as civilians. They were posing as journalists, as doctors.
No one is buying your justifications for
literally with that?
They bombed. They did controlled demolitions of residential buildings of every single university. They want to erase the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. We have eyes and ears. We saw what happened. You can see the aerial pictures of the entirety of the Gaza Strip right now. I'm not done talking. Let me finish my point.
Go ahead.
Okay? Every single hospital has been bombed. Every single university, Hamas. It's Hamas.
You know what? It's brilliant.
It's brilliant. Have no responsibility
Hamas thinks
whatsoever.
If I'm in civilian headquarters,
Hamas.
Israel can't bomb me.
So you're
Israel
telling
should
me,
lose the war because they're in civilian
when
homes?
you have the government officials from Israel literally saying out loud over and over again,
they don't
it
make the
doesn't matter.
decisions.
What
they don't call the shots.
Ends up happening.
They don't call the shots.
What they say ends up happening.
That's not true.
What they say ends up happening. They're going to resettle the Gaza Strip.
Okay, I'm going to give you one last stat from UNRWA, and then I'm going to move on. I just want to get
really,
this
really
point out.
Okay.
Okay. According to you, there's no buildings left in Gaza. Okay. According to UNRWA numbers, which I don't even trust, they completely demolished, I'm talking, 73,000 buildings. They
83%.
collapsed more, 83% of the buildings, right. If they killed 67,000 people and they demolished 73,000 buildings, that means they killed less than one person per entirety of a building that was knocked out. You know why? Because Israel might be the only military in the world that will send leaflets before they attack, sirens before they attack. Everyone in Gaza has Wi-Fi apparently, alerts to their phone before they attack, and give them a chance to evacuate.
Are you gonna appreciate getting
0.9 people per building?
Okay,
That's an amazing ratio for war.
We're close to now a death toll of 69,000 people slaughtered
Then that's
in Gaza.
0.97 people per building.
I really
very low.
don't want to yell, but you keep interrupting, and it makes it difficult for me to make my point when you're interrupting me. So please stop doing that. I don't want to yell. All right. Almost 69,000 people slaughtered, gone. There's 10,000 people missing, trapped under the rubble, presumed dead for obvious reasons, okay? How are you going to sit here and talk about but they dropped leaflets. They dropped
by the way,
leaflets.
I'm just
can people just drop leaflets at your home before they totally annihilate it and destroy it?
It totally blows my mind.
And you're going to say
that's
thank
one
you?
person per building.
Okay,
In war ratio, that's
totally,
the lowest in history of war.
Okay,
I
Emily,
gotta say,
hold
that's
on,
pretty
Lindy.
that's
that
precise.
argument
That's
is
precise.
so insane to me.
How is that insane?
Because you're doing a ratio of people versus building.
If a whole
There are
building
people's homes
collapses
that have
and
been
one
destroyed.
person gets killed, that's precision attacking. That's my point, Anna. I'm not justifying anyone
That's not
dying. I'm not justifying. I don't want anyone to die.
No.
I wish this war never
you do,
started
though.
to begin with.
You do, though.
No,
you
I
do,
don't.
though.
I'm
You
not
don't see
a
them as
monster.
humans. Their entire lives have been wiped out
And
entirely.
I blame Hamas. I'm not happy their lives are destroyed, but this whole thing could have been avoided.
You know what this reminds me of?
It's almost like everyone forgets how this started.
It's just like an analogy. Let me give you, just to make it simple.
You don't have to defend this. I know you're smart.
I want to.
Which is very concerning. But
I'm
let me,
really-
can I say
No,
sorry?
I want her to talk because she hasn't been able to speak. Sorry.
I've been trying to get my point in for her.
I'll go to you next.
I really love the passion. I really do. And I think that, in everything, as I've watched politics over my lifetime, I've realized that everything has to come back to, so what do we do about it? Because we can argue back and forth, and there are valid points. But I'm certainly not Switzerland here. I have all my own opinions. But the one thing that's not being mentioned is what has happened to Christian churches,
Yes.
Christian buildings,
Yes.
Christian people
Yes.
have
Amen.
also
Thank
been
you.
bombed. And I want to know, where's the accountability for that in media, in our own country, by the way?
I agree.
Where's the accountability from I've never heard Israel mentioned. I've certainly never heard Netanyahu mention it. I would like to know the answer on that.
apologize.
And what about a three-state solution? Why is it always, two-state or not? Why can't it be a three-state solution?
Wait, why can't it be Jews and Muslims live together? Why can't they be? How come Muslims are allowed to live in Israel, 2.8 million Muslims, but a Jew in Gaza is a hostage? Why does it have to be one state, two state? Can't be a country where everyone lives like the United States, perhaps?
I mean, that would be ideal,
That
but
would be
Israel
ideal.
does not
They
want
don't
that.
want it.
They want a
zero-state
Jewish
solution.
state. That's what they say.
And
Okay,
Hamas wants a Muslim state.
Okay, let
So
them
then
have
they
their
need to
own state.
negotiate.
Let them have self-determination. By the way, Palestinian Muslims and Christians have been living very peacefully together, side by side, in the West Bank. And in the West Bank, those
Jews
churches
weren't allowed, by the way.
Those churches, well, Jews tried to steal that land and settle that land in the West Bank. They're building illegal settlements as we speak and attempting to annex it. But
they can't legally
the
live
point
there
I'm
'cause
trying to
they'd be killed
make
by
is that
Muslims, but okay.
not just in Gaza, where the only Catholic church was bombed by the IDF, years prior, there's a church in the West Bank that ended up getting bombed as well, and it was a disaster because there were people even sheltering in that church for safety, and they bombed that church anyway. So
Yeah, it's very confusing to be a Christian when you travel there and see all that. And again, I'm from Jewish lineage. I really, really hate everything that has happened here. I hope it amounts to good things eventually, right? We all hope that. I think everyone sitting at this table really hopes that. But it's really confusing. I don't understand things like why at the place where the Garden of Gethsemane, where there's a tomb of Jesus and so many holy sites like that, why is it allowed that these prayers are piped in so loud you can't even be there and say a prayer without? Why is that allowed? Why does the Knesset allow that? I don't understand it. So I think it comes down to we can stop arguing if there are laws in place that reign over all of this. For example, when you guys were talking about the media and how much money has been spent buying influencers, I'm glad it's disclosed. I'm glad we know about it, like I said. But beyond that, what can be done? Should there be limits on
I can tell you exactly.
We need regulations, I think.
But do we?
Farah.
Because when you put in regulations, if I can just say really quickly, for example, election reform regulations that we put in a long time ago, all the money just then goes under the table. So disclosure and transparency, I think, are number one. I think that Americans need to demand that from everyone, not just Israel, not just other foreign interests. Total transparency, I think, is one thing. But I think having conversations about what happened, because the reality is, we may never know everything. So I think having conversations about solutions is a really good place to start to come together and to say, hey, maybe you think this and you think this. What can we agree on and work for together?
Yeah, there are some points that I just got to address. I can't let it slide on the table.
And then we got to move on.
Yeah, when somebody says, oh, I blame Hamas. I blame Hamas for everything. You know what it reminds me of? When an abusive husband punches you in the face, leaves a scar, and said, you made me do it. I blame, it's your fault that my fist landed in your face. It's your fault that you're all bruised. You made me do this. You made me slap you in the face. That's number one. And also, when someone clinically talks about death statistics, like murder, it's so flippantly, just using numbers like, reducing human beings to mere numbers. It reminds me of a very chilling Stalin quote. Joseph Stalin once said, millions of people dying is a tragedy. One person dying is a tragedy. Millions of people dying is a mere statistic.
Yep, that's so true.
And you just cannot reduce this to one death per building like it's nothing. Every single one of those deaths represented a mom, a father, a daughter, a brother, someone's loved one. You can't just say, oh, it's one, it's not a big deal.
I'm not dismissing.
No, it's
every human life counts as much as the other, no matter their religion, where they're from, age, it doesn't matter. How about this? If it was an old man, I'd feel sorry. But my point is, everyone's acting like it's not a war. War is not pretty. It's not flowers and unicorns and roses. I can't help but to think, what would America have done if Mexico came to Burning Man, killed people, took hostages, and then started a war against Mexico, but all of a sudden, all the militants are in civilian homes? Would Trump have been like, you know what? I don't know. I'm not going to go because there's like women and children there. So let's surrender this war. You keep the hostages because you're doing a good job embedding yourself in civilian homes. I'm not going to engage in this war. So, we lost, you won. Keep killing the Jews.
Well, actually, after September 11th, I will say the U.S. military did commit some war crimes, but they didn't level Afghanistan and they didn't level Iraq. And so it's really about how you engage in that war. And by the way, when the war crimes were committed in Abu Ghraib, for instance, when the torture reporting started to come out, the American people were highly critical. They didn't feel the need to provide cover for the war crimes our government had engaged in. And I think that criticism is what reeled the federal government in. You're not seeing that in Israel right now because you have a legion of propagandists that keep justifying atrocities that are being committed in Gaza and the West Bank with our money. And that's the other issue people have.
I'm waiting for someone to have a better answer as what they would have done.
Well, I'm open to tell you exactly what we would have done. For example,
I would have done targeted, I know for a fact that they just wanted to level Gaza and get rid of the Palestinians.
You would have targeted who?
I would have targeted Hamas.
And you don't believe they were embedded in civilian homes?
No, I don't. I don't believe it. I think that's a talking point, and I think it's a weak talking point to say the least. Okay, Mossad's headquarters is near a residential area.
They target 1 million residentials every single day.
Okay,
every day
I guess they did the right thing because Mossad is embedded among civilians.
But that's what they are doing, and my point is, the Mossad is in Tel Aviv, correct. You are not going to find the IDF in any hospitals, or in tunnels under the hospitals, in residential towers, in schools, in nurseries. But the IDF is publishing literal videos. I went there myself.
Okay, so let me ask you something, Emily. All right?
But you don't believe that?
No, I don't. 2 years.
There's video evidence proving you wrong.
2 years. They've been in Gaza for 2 years. Hamas is back out. And they're like, oh, we might need to go back in and do something about the terror tunnels. You had 2 years. You didn't do anything about the tunnels. You had 2 years. Hamas is still there. Seems like they spent most of their time leveling Gaza so they can make it unlivable and get rid of the Palestinians. That's what their whole goal was. That's my problem. My problem is the very people that they were supposed to target after the atrocities they committed in Israel, that wasn't their big objective. That wasn't their big goal. Their big goal was, you know what? We want to get rid of these Palestinians. Let's destroy everything they have, every university, every hospital, every school, every refugee camp. And that's what they did. That's what they did.
They could have done it a lot quicker than in 2 years if that was their goal, which I would never believe.
That reminds me of Carthage, you know, when the Romans put salt in the ground in order to make it unlivable, to ensure that they couldn't grow crops. Israel wanted to make sure that Gaza was completely unlivable. And I just wanted to say something else to a point that you raised earlier about how you alleged that Israel went out of its way to make sure that they spared civilian lives. Is that the point that you were trying to make? Mm-hmm. How do you then justify the double tap strike? And let me explain to our viewers what that is. For example, if Israel bombed a hospital, they would wait for rescuers to come.
Yeah, the rescue workers to show up and then bomb it again.
Bomb it again. So they know that people would flood the bombed area in order to save lives, as you should. And in the interim, they would wait, and then bomb all the rescue workers along with the original area.
Well, you mentioned before the bombs, they announce exactly where they're bombing at what time, which is unheard of in a war.
They did not announce that they were going to do a double tap on that hospital.
Fact. Every time there's a rocket sent,
okay, why don't we give you a moment to look up evidence of warning people of a double tap strike?
Okay, so we got to move on. Okay,
we got to follow up on that because we can't let people make claims like that without substantiation. So let's give her 30 minutes to find the evidence.
Okay.
What's up, guys? Amy Dangerfield here. If you liked that video and you want to watch more like it, I need you to click over to YouTube, search up Her Take, and click subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.